From nearly no hit to a remarkable comeback victory, the New York Mets just won themselves one heck of a series.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, the postcast. This is a new feature we have with the show, and I picked a day to come on and host it for the first time. You're finding us streaming right now on the Locked On Mets YouTube channel and Locked On New York Sports, your home for post-game shows of Mets, Jets, Yankees, Giants, and more. Chris Schubert will be hosting these shows after Mets games throughout the rest of this season, of course, going into next year as well. But I'll be appearing at times, and I chose a day here to come on. I'm your host of Locked On Mets, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, you can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. And you can find any of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Wow. I don't know what to say, except for Francisco Lindor is the MVP. It's been about a week since we had an MVP moment from Francisco Lindor. On today's edition of Locked On Mets, I talked about the fact that when this team doesn't have Lindor going, the entire lineup seems to struggle. And here we see the Mets get no hit into the ninth inning. Francisco Lindor is leading off against Bowden Francis. He falls behind to an 0-2 count. Gets a fastball where Francis was probably trying to throw one up and out of the zone, trying to get Lindor to chase, but he threw it in the zone, up in the zone, but Lindor was ready for it. He crushed it. He tied the game. And once again, we see Francisco Lindor with one of these pivotal MVP moments. Not to mention, he nearly ended the game in the bottom half with one of the most remarkable barehanded plays you'll see from a shortstop. The guy beat it out, but that's a story for the next segment as we talk about the pitching in this game. Just an incredible victory for this Mets team. And it was a game where it really felt like you were just pushing up against history because Bowden Francis for the Toronto Blue Jays, young starting pitcher, I believe he exceeded his rookie status last year, but still essentially like his first time really going through as a consistent starting pitcher. He has been dominant for the Blue Jays. And that Blue Jays team played a good series. Defensively, they played really well. Offensively, not as much, but they certainly got some great pitching, particularly the last two games from Chris Bassett and Bowden Francis. And Francis, again, has been flirting with this. He nearly threw a no-hitter on August 24th, took a no-hitter into the ninth inning against the Angels. That was a game where he struck out 12. This time, he only struck out one, but it sort of just felt like this game that it was setting up for your typical no-hitter. The sixth inning, Harrison Bader leads things off, hits one almost, off the wall, and Davis Schneider makes a leaping catch into the fence, and that's your typical no-hitter moment, right? Every no-hitter is supposed to have that remarkable catch. We saw that. After that hit by Bader, Francisco Lindor comes up, scorches a line drive at 99 miles per hour right at Vladimir Guerrero Jr., just right at him. So again, the Mets are hitting the ball hard. Even though Bowden Francis was great in this game, again, only one strikeout. The Mets hit the ball at 89 miles per hour 15 times. So it's not like they weren't seeing him at all. It's not like they weren't having some good at-bats against him, but it was just one of those games where it felt like history was insurmountable. It really did. I was fully expecting Bowden Francis to finish it off, especially after the eighth inning. Again, one of those tropes of what needs to happen for a no-hitter. Here you have a young pitcher at 102 pitches, and in today's game, you're playing that whole, conversation out of, all right, is he going to end up getting the chance at it? He's through 7 and 102 pitches. The bullpen was up in the seventh inning. Are they going to let him pitch the eighth? All right, no one's up. He's going out there for the eighth. And then you see the first two batters in that eighth inning for the New York Mets each swing at the first pitch. It was Starling Marte and Francisco Alvarez. They each swing at the first pitch, get out. Jesse Winker comes on as a pinch hitter. And again, more of this narrative building. He pinch hits for Harrison Bader, who nearly got the only hit in the game. And Davis Schneider was pulled for defense, as Gary Cohen pointed out on the broadcast. So in that same inning, you had the guy that made the remarkable catch that would have gone down in history and the guy that hit the ball, both pulled. Jesse Winker gets out. So again, it was just one of those games where I really thought that the Mets were going to lose 1-0. And I was going to make the argument of, you know what? It was just a game where the baseball gods were against the Mets, and the Blue Jays were going to win that game because Bowden Francis has been working to a no-hitter. Over his last 43 innings pitched now, including this start, he has given up 13 hits. His last start against the Phillies, he gave up 6. So think about that. That's 6 starts where the guy's given up, if you eliminate the last one, or 5 starts where he's given up 7 hits, whatever it is. He has been a remarkable pitcher for this Blue Jays team, and it was right there for him. But Francisco Lindor has the moment, and I will say there was part of me that thought about it when it got through 7. Not after the 8th inning. The way the 8th inning went, I was like, all right, it's going to be a no-hitter. But going into that 8th inning, there was part of me when he was at 102 pitches that thought it was a good thing for the New York Mets, because a fresh arm out of the bullpen probably has a better chance to complete that no-hitter. Guys, over 100 pitches, doesn't get to do that often. I thought that there would be an opportunity in that 8th inning for the Mets to grind out some at-bats and take the lead in that 8th because they were trailing 1-0 for some time. Again, in the next segment, we'll talk about Shawn Manaea's performance. But when that didn't happen and it was that 8-pitch inning or whatever it was, I thought for sure that it was going to end in a no-hitter. But Francisco Lindor, again, coming through and delivering one of these moments that we're going to look back on at the end of the season. And if you are in my camp as the Locked On Mets host that has been making the MVP case for Lindor for about a month now, it's another game that you can point to and say, when has Shohei Ohtani needed to come through and be the guy in a moment like that? Because for the Mets, if it wasn't Lindor in this game, it probably wouldn't have been anybody. And once he does hit that home run and ties it up, now Chad Green comes on, and all of a sudden the pressure's off everybody else. Jose Iglesias gets an infield hit. Bad throw by the third baseman allows him to advance to second. Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos flip that order. Vientos first, then Nimmo. They each drew walks to load the bases. Eddie Alvarez comes on to pinch run for Vientos, and you have Pete Alonso up, and you got to give Alonso credit. He falls behind 0-2, gets a couple sliders out of the zone, and actually spit on them. He took those pitches he's been striking out on, gets himself to an even count, hits a ball deep enough to get a sacrifice fly. Then JD Martinez comes out. He has a great at-bat. He draws a walk to load the bases again. Starling Marte, good enough at-bat. Hits a fly ball to shallow right, but with Eddie Alvarez's speed at third base, it was going to be a really tough play. Throw came out the line anyway, and the Mets all of a sudden had a comfortable lead. The Blue Jays go to the bullpen again, bring out Genesis Cabrera, and Francisco Alvarez puts the cherry on top of the incredible ice cream sundae that was that 9th inning. It's a 3-run homer on the first pitch, breaks that game wide open, and the Mets have a 6-run inning. They find their way to one of the more remarkable victories of the season. So just a crazy win for this team, and now you carry that momentum into an off day, which is great. Then you have a big series in Philadelphia. So I think this was a really, really incredible win for this team that makes you believe that they're going to end up playing in the playoffs this season. We're going to talk about the impact of the game in the final segment today as it carries forward. But before we get into that, I want to talk about Shawn Manah because his performance should not go overlooked. He was once again sensational. So we'll touch on the pitching side of this game in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. This is it. Next week is the final homestand of the season. You got to get out to Citi Field and support this Mets team because it is going to be an environment to be in for these playoff games played in September. You want to be there, and Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They also have their Game Time Picks feature. So this is going to filter out the fluff and show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And I know personally, when I go to a Mets game, I'm not buying my ticket until I'm about to walk into the ballpark because Game Time makes it that easy, and they're the place to go for last-minute tickets. So I can scroll through my Game Time picks, find seats that I love in a minute. I'm checked out. The tickets are delivered to my phone. I'm in the ballpark. If you want to go to a Mets game down the stretch or any live event near you, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, Redeem the code Locked On MLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Let's talk a little bit about Shawn Manah. And also, if you are an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day. You can take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you're going to be Locked On Mets insider, you can find the link in your episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so Shawn Manah gets overlooked in this game because Bowden Francis takes a no-hitter into the ninth inning. But Manaea was matching him at every turn, really only had one bad inning, and that was in the fourth, where he gives up a pair of base hits to lead things off to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Ernie Clement. He then walks the bases loaded. So bases loaded, nobody out in a 0-0 game. Could have gotten really bad. He gets a ground ball to Mark Vientos, and Vientos made a great play on that ball. Backhand, comes across the bag, gets the force out at third. With his cannon of an arm, he nearly throws out the runner at first for a double play, but does not get that runner. That does take some of the pressure off Manaea, though. You know, at third base open. He gets a big strikeout, gets a pop-up, gets out of that inning. And from that point on, he retired 10 straight batters, really carrying himself all the way into the seventh inning, where he got a couple of outs, but walked a few. So ultimately for Shawn Manah, he goes 6 2/3, allows 3 hits, walks 4, strikes out 8, gives up just that 1 run. He also went to a season high of 109 pitches. And I'll tell you what, I've talked about this on my show a lot lately. The Mets are going to ride Shawn Manah as their ace down the stretch. I think Luis Severino is certainly going to get a playoff start if the Mets get there. David Peterson probably as well. But they don't have the importance of Shawn Manah, and I don't think they have the confidence or the Mets don't have the confidence in them that they do in Manaea. They have been setting him up to pitch on regular rest. And so what that means from, the tea leaves I'm reading is you should see Shawn Manah pitch again on Monday to start out their next homestand. That would set him up to pitch on Saturday against the Phillies, and then he can turn right back around, pitch game 3 of that critical series against the Atlanta Braves. And it's those 3 games that Shawn Manah is going to pitch that you have to win. He has been so good lately, and the Mets just seem to win when he's on the mound. He has now pitched into the 7th inning in his last 6 starts. His last 2, he hasn't gotten that final out of the 7th, but he has done a great job getting right on the doorstep of it. And he has pitched into the 7th inning 8 of his last 9 starts. So 6 of those, he actually completed all 7. It's just an incredible, command of the strikes in that we're saying. Yes, he did walk 4 guys in the game today, but overall, the ability to walk a batter and then go right back and attack the next hitter, and to know that your stuff is going to play. I think that's the thing about Shawn Manah right now. He has all the confidence in the world that his stuff is good. And that has come from really 2 years of work for Shawn Manah. This is a guy that was, I don't want to say falling out of baseball, because he certainly wasn't, but more a guy that was falling out of being a consistent starting pitcher that you knew was going to be there each year. Last season with the Padres, he was more of a swingman, pitched out of the bullpen, but it was a progression to get there. With the A's, there was a long period of time where he was just a guy that you penciled into your rotation, hand the ball every 5th day. You knew he was going to be out there. And then as his career went on and some of the results weren't there, he became more of a 5th starter and then eventually that swingman. But Shawn Manah worked at Driveline a couple of years ago at the beginning of last season, I think the offseason leading into 2023, started adding some velocity to his fastball, doing training that he had never done previously in his career. Some of those results showed up last season, but now the Mets are taking full advantage of them, and you're seeing the fruits of just a long run of continuing to develop as a pitcher. They showed some video during the broadcast today of how Shawn Manah, when he warms up for games, has the catcher warm up. If you look at a bullpen in a big league ballpark, there's like 3 mounds. He has them. He goes to the far left mound. He has the catcher go all the way to the far right home plate and tries to command his pitches there, then does it the inverse. And Jeremy Hefner started this drill with him to try to get him to be able to control both sides of the plate and realize if you can throw strikes, to that degree across different batters' boxes, well, then once you have to just throw down the middle, it becomes a lot easier. I think you're seeing that. Just a guy that really has that confidence that he can dot his pitches, locate his fastball. And there was even some calls in this game that Manaea didn't get, where you're like, wow, he just painted that on the top corner of the zone, and the umpire just missed the call, but that should have been strike three. It's been masterful stuff, and I think you feel very confident with this guy being your ace pitcher down the stretch. Like I said, got a big start against the Phillies and the Braves. Two big starts coming up to close out the season. His next one should be against the Nationals on Monday. Then you'll see him pitch in that Phillies series at home. And then the biggest game of the season, probably what could be potentially a rubber match against the Braves, where that series might decide who makes the playoffs. It could set up that way. And I don't think there's another pitcher the Mets would want on the mound in that situation. So another really good start by Manaea, where he was able to keep that game in check, where even though you were no hit through 8 innings, one big swing by Francisco Lindor tied it up in the 9th, and the Mets were able to explode from there. And also, you got to credit Reed Garrett, because he came on in the 7th inning with 2 runners on left by Manaea, got a big strikeout to get through that inning, got the first 2 outs of the 8th, gave up a base hit. Danny Young came on. He got a big out. And then in the 9th inning, it was Ryan Stanek, who didn't look great, didn't look terrible. He has a 5-run lead. He gets a couple of outs, but also walked the leadoff man, gives up a base hit that scored a run, gave up a second hit, and with 2 runners on, 2 outs, 4-run lead. Edwin Diaz, having already warmed up, Carlos Mendoza wasn't going to risk it, goes to Edwin for the save. He only needs 1 pitch to get his 18th save of the season. And the New York Mets were able to somehow win this series. We talked about it going into the week. What did the Mets have to do, to continue to keep pace in this wild card race? And I basically said, you got to win these 2 series. And it was looking like they were going to lose what was supposed to be the easier of the 2 series. Now you found your way to winning 2 of those games. Tough task ahead, going to Philadelphia, try to beat a Phillies team that is playing much better baseball lately. And so it's going to be a tough matchup. But the way this Mets team is playing, I'm not going to count them out from winning a couple of these games. And I think the real benefit here is now there's a little bit less pressure, right? If you had lost the game today, go into Philly, if you lose that series, where are you going to be in the wild card race? Now things are a little bit different. And I think this really does change the momentum for the New York Mets. And that's where I want to close the show today. What does this win mean to the Mets as a team, the morale, and can this get the bats going in particular? I want to go through why I believe this is a really good thing for this lineup. So we'll touch on that in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. You can get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. On Sunday, looking at some NFL stats. Maybe you like Malik Neighbors and his receiving yards. You can take more there, and you can combine that with something in a Mets game if you wanted to. So you can go across sports. Maybe you like Neighbors, you like Lindor. You can go more on hits, more on yards, whatever it is. Prize Picks is there so you can play with your friends. And also, you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. So the New York Mets had the benefit of being the early game today, so we don't know what's going to happen yet with the Atlanta Braves. They're playing a rubber match themselves against the Washington Nationals. I believe that is Max Fried versus Jake Irvin. So on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets, I will still cover that game and the latest in the race. We'll see how the Mets victory really does impact things, but this was, again, a moment where the Mets had to win a series, and they did that. And we talked about this when it came to the winning streak. By going on and reeling off 9 straight wins, the Mets got themselves back into a playoff position. And so now they are once again in the spot where it's just about winning series. You win this series, big check mark. You find a way to win in Philadelphia, there you go, another check mark. You go home. If you can win those 2 series, take 5 of 7 on that homestand, you are going to be in position where if you beat the Braves in that series in Atlanta, I honestly think you will be pretty much there as far as clinching a playoff spot. That is, the run here for the Mets that they have to think about, Beyond that, yes, there's a series against the Brewers, and obviously those games might matter. But to me, everything is leading up to that matchup, Mets versus Braves. And the Braves yesterday, they scored 12 runs on 15 hits. These are two lineups that for most of September so far had just been awful, brutal to watch. The Mets, until that ninth inning, were about to go through a series where they did not hit a home run and just did not look good. Francisco Lindor, who hadn't had an extra base hit in 6 games, if I'm not mistaken, might have been his 7th game if he didn't come through here. This was a huge swing for him to put another home run in his stat page. More importantly, a big home run that delivers a victory to the New York Mets and hopefully gets him going again. You're playing this weekend in Philadelphia. That is a bandbox. Home runs will change the tenor of each of these games. So for the New York Mets to find a couple home runs late here, I think that is a huge thing for this team. Francisco Alvarez getting the big home run there to break the game open. He's starting to string together some better at-bats. You're seeing him ground out still and get out, but when Francisco Alvarez was grounding out 2 weeks ago, he was rolling it over. Today, grounded out to the shortstop, hit the ball on the ground really hard. And it's a little thing. It's not something that you're going to ooh and ah over, but at the same time, it does show a little bit of a better approach. It does show that he's squaring up the baseball a little bit more, and it could lead to better things. And then here you go. He gets a fastball down the middle first pitch and is looking for it, crushes a 3-run homer. So getting Alvarez going, that could be huge. The thing about this Mets lineup that we've liked all season talking about this team is the fact that it's so ignitable. You know, you went into the year and there was times there was sort of a defense first team when you had Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor starting in the outfield, right? Well, now your lineup is going to get Jesse Winker and Starling Marte. So there's a little more ignitability in the outfield. In the infield, going from Brett Beatty to now Mark Vientos over the last 90-plus games has been a huge addition of power into the lineup. Vientos, arguably the best power hitter on this team. Him or Lindor lately, because Lindor's been on a heater in the second half with the home runs, and that was a big one today. But again, there's just more options, and you still have Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, and JD Martinez that have done it for their careers. And we haven't seen it lately. For Nimmo and Martinez, they haven't really been hot since June. For Alonso, he's had his home run stretches, but he's also looked terrible in a lot of these at-bats. Big at-bat for Pete today to look at a couple sliders outside of the zone, get himself into hitter's count. If nothing else, if he just starts guessing right a little bit more, that's going to be good for the Mets, because at times lately, it just feels like he's always guessing wrong. When he's guessing he's going to get the slider outside of the zone, it's a fastball on the black and he strikes out looking. When he's guessing it's going to be a pitch he can handle in the zone, it's a slider away and he swings through it. Today, to go into that situation where a run is all you need, you got no outs, bases loaded, opportunity, you just got to get the ball into the outfield. He did his job as one of the best run producers in baseball throughout his career. He has that in him, and you just need all of these guys to step up down the stretch. So to see Pete come through in this game, to see Lindor, Alvarez, those were all good signs. Brandon Nimmo hit another couple balls on the screws. So I still think he's trending in the right direction, even though the results haven't been there. And man, that's been the season for Brandon Nimmo. If there's a guy that's hit into more bad luck this year than Nimmo on the Mets, I don't know who it is. I mean, maybe Lindor in the early parts of the season, but those hits started to fall for Lindor. Nimmo, it's just been a constant thing where he's the guy that hits line drives right at people. But some of those line drives went away in the tail end of July, pretty much all of August. So now you're seeing him hit these foul ball home runs or drive line drives right at the outfielders. Hopefully some of those start to find gaps, because if the Mets for their final 2+ weeks here get Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, JD Martinez firing on all cylinders with the still present threats of course, Lindor, Vientos, Winker, this lineup still has it in them to go off. It just hasn't happened in some time. So to get no hit and then break out for 6 runs, that's the type of turn in momentum that can carry over, particularly when you have an off day to sort of sit on it. And then you go into a series against the Phillies, where that's going to be as much of a playoff environment as you're going to find in the regular season. 2 hated rivals. Phillies have a magic number they're chasing, and the Mets are one of the teams standing in the way of them finally clinching this division. First division since what? 11, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. So they got a ton to play for. The Mets, obviously, every loss is one game closer to being eliminated. Every win gets you closer to your own magic number of making it to the playoffs, and that's not going to be decided till probably the final weekend of the season. So this is going to be a fun series this weekend to cover. I think the Mets can carry the momentum from this game, bring it into that series in that environment, and maybe the bats start to hit. That's the hope, at least. But honestly, before the turnaround happened in that ninth inning, I was going to come on this show and say that I thought getting no hit was almost a good thing. And here's why I say that. I know that sounds crazy, but to me, watching the Mets at bats in that game, the way they were still putting bat on ball and they weren't striking out, I felt like they were just knocking on the doorstep the whole game. And obviously they eventually break through. But I almost felt like if it was obviously a plane flight like this is better, but a flight where they come off of a series loss, they might have had a chip on their shoulder anyway going into the next one. So I really do have confidence in this team to find their way through the rest of this season and just make it to October. There's been so much leading up to this, from Lindor's performance as an MVP candidate to Shawn Manaea's breakout as a guy that's going to get some down ballot Cy Young votes. I don't think he's going to finish top 5, but is Shawn Manah going to have a little mark on his baseball reference page that says like Cy Young 7? Potentially. I mean, he really has pitched well. He's going to get the chance to show that a couple more times. It's been a fun year, and this was one of those games that is probably going to be on the Mount Rushmore at the end of the season of best moments from this season. You're watching those rain delay. What do they call them? Jeez. The Mets rain delay ones was the great endings. I'm drawing a blank here on the SNY rain delay ones. But when they do the 2024 Mets talking about the great endings of all these games, I mean, this one's going to be right atop the list for just an incredible finish in a game that we won't soon forget. So that's going to be all for this postcast. And if I haven't explained this well enough, I just want to let the audience that has been here from the beginning to understand what the postcast is. This is not changing your typical Locked On Mets programming. I'm still doing a show every single day of the week for the rest of this season. If you're watching on YouTube each day, those episodes go up at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you listen on the audio feed, it's still going to hit your feed before you wake up each day, so you can start off your day with your Locked On Mets content, breaking down the latest from each of these games. The postcast is just an additional show that you can tune into. Chris Schubert is going to be doing these shows. I caught his one yesterday after the Mets loss. Really great analysis. Really like to hear what he had to say. So this is an additional offering. You can find it as we're streaming right now on the Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel. So if you just subscribe to Locked On Mets, and I do appreciate if you do, trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. But if you subscribe here, go over to Locked On New York Sports. Not only is it going to be postcast for the Mets, you can find Yankees, Giants, Jets. So a lot of great stuff going on over there. And if you are a podcast listener, you are going to see these shows show up on your podcast feed labeled as postcast. So it's going to be big bold letters, say postcast, different image as well, so you can differentiate. Again, my show doesn't change, but you get an additional offering here of Locked On Mets. So I'm really excited for Chris to sort of join the team here. And hopefully we'll be doing these shows not just throughout the rest of September, but maybe into October. I'll have a full edition of Locked On Mets for you tomorrow morning, so make sure you check that out. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. After your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.